I'd like to welcome everyone this morning to the second lecture in a series sponsored by Boston University's Humanities Foundation and organized by the Department of Anthropology. For those of you who attended the first lecture, you know in the fall we had Dr. Hamid as our initial speaker. And today we have as our second speaker a gentleman of equal prominence, and his ideas are equally exciting as Dr. Shakur's. When it comes to us, actually, in terms of where he's coming from us immediately speaking, he's coming from Chicago and has only been in Boston for about 10 hours, I think, 10 or 11 hours. He was in Chicago lecture yesterday. And he will be participating in a conference this weekend at the Harvard Law School. And the subject of that conference is the Islamic marriage contract. And I've talked to some of you about this. This looks to be a very, very interesting and important conference. And I'm going to be participating over there and listening to a different talk and looking forward to that as well. But our guest, Dr. Nasser Hamid Abuzeid, is presently visiting professor at Leiden University in the Netherlands. But his permanent academic post is in Cairo, at the University of Cairo, where he's professor of Islamic studies. As some of you know, his writings, which many people have applauded for their profound scholarly quality and for their penetrating insights on Islam, became the focus for radical Islamists a few years ago. And unfortunately, they've made our guest a subject of a rather unfortunate incident in which he and his wife were basically taken to court because of the quality of his writings. And perhaps if some of you are interested in this case during the questions and answers, you might address some of your questions to Dr. Abuzeid. But it gives me great pleasure to welcome a man of great prominence. This is the first time I've met him, but we have many mutual friends. And I know from mutual friends that this is not only a man of outstanding intellectual quality, but a man of incredible integrity and moral character. And it makes me doubly pleased, therefore, to welcome him here to Boston University as a speaker in our series on confounding autocracy. Thank you very much for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Well, in every lecture, every public lecture, I, of course, prepare text. This is usual for people who are in the academic circle. But sometimes I feel the text will keep me away from communicating the audience. So let me try to communicate what I have written in a very formal way, to communicate this in informal way, in a narrative story. Some personal aspect will be mixed with some academic and intellectual history. Because it's very important to introduce myself and to introduce to you how I came across different stages of development and my way of thinking about my religion, about Islam, about my country, about my academic life. When I started my career after graduating from Cairo University in 1972, I graduated with a very high honor degree. So I was appointed directly as an assistant teacher in the university. I was planning to work in literary criticism, being aware of the danger of working Islamic studies with any kind of new methodology, or trying to raise other questions than the traditional questions. But anyway, the Department of Arabic, from which I graduated, had a problem. The chair of Islamic studies was vacant for more than, let me see, more than 70 years. Why? Why this specific chair of Islamic studies was vacant? Because the last student who made his PhD in Islamic studies faced problems which ended in firing him from the university and making everyone afraid to take Islamic studies. So Islamic studies was subject to anyone who would like to teach Quran. Okay? And teaching Islamic studies during these 70 years was taken as some sort of blessing, some sort of devotion, not an academic way of teaching the student. So the department decided that it is time to have the new appointed assistant teacher to be Islamic studies. I refused. Not because I'm against Islamic studies, but because I know what happened some 70 years ago. I know the whole story, and I have read the book, which was a PhD thesis and was refuted by the university, and how the man who was alive at that time suffered being away from his university, being away of the academic life, and he found some other jobs. But he didn't stop to write Islamic studies. But anyway, lastly, it was, either to work Islamic studies or to find other job than being in the teaching in the university. So I decided, well, I'll take something in between traditional Islamic studies and literary criticism. So if someone asked me, I said, well, no, I'm a literary critic. But in fact, I was in the heart of Islamic studies. So I took in my master thesis the problem of the metaphor in the Quran. So the metaphor would connect me to linguistics and literary studies, but in the Quran, this is Islamic studies, the notion of metaphor in the Quran by the Mu'tazilites. The Mu'tazilites is the rational theologian movement which started in the history of Islamic thought in the 8th century. Let me give you some information about those Mu'tazilites or rational theologians whom I studied their notion of metaphor in the Quran in my master thesis. The Mu'tazilites' theory, for example, let me just give some more. Okay. Mu'tazilism. This is the Arabic thing of this rational theology. Mu'tazilism did not begin as an intellectual exercise, but rather it evolved out of the struggle of the Abbasids against the Umayyads. So if you have some idea about the history, there was the Umayyad. The Umayyad dynasty was absolutely Arabic dynasty, very sincere to the Arabic tradition, against non-Arab. So the Abbasid was a new movement trying to integrate non-Arab with Arab. So it was some sort of modernity at that time. Okay? Let's have the term modernity in the critical text. Modernity as opposed to traditionalism. So the Mu'tazilites came about during that period of struggle between the Umayyads and the Abbasids. The idea, for example, of divine predetermination, Jabr or Qadar, was the theological expression of the Umayyad absolute political rule. The Umayyad, they came to power through military power, to the Caliphate. So in order to justify their regime, they used the notion of Jabr, the notion of predestination. They said, well, God wanted us to be a ruler. So if it wasn't God's will, we wouldn't have succeeded to rule you. So they use this predestination, Jabr or Qadar, as a theological expression for their absolute political rule. The Mu'tazilites insisted on human free will, al-ikhtiyar, or at least on the illegitimacy of making God responsible for human sin. So the Umayyad system was considered as a very bad system. So making God responsible for this system, it would be like insulting God. This was the Mu'tazilite idea. Another reason for the Mu'tazilite strong rationalistic stance was that they were forced to defend Islam against other religions. Their argument had to be rationally sound to be accepted. Hence their interest in the Aristotelian laws of logic. At the time, the main school of philosophical speculation. In their struggle, the Mu'tazilites developed three major epistemological principles, which embodied the rational understanding of the world, man, God, and his revelation. And that's exactly the first ever reforming movement in Islam, the first modernizing thought. Maybe, well, I wouldn't be exaggerating if I say this is the first enlightenment movement in Islamic thought. The first principle was that knowledge emanates from this world. It is only possible to speak about the other, invisible world on the basis of evidence furnished by the reality of the seen world. So man starts from here, and then he can move from here to understand there, the metaphysical world. God and his attributes can only be known by reflection and by acquired knowledge, not by direct or revealed knowledge. So to know God is not to go to the Quran. To know God, it's a rational direction. It's a rational acquired knowledge. And then the Quran will approve this knowledge. If there is any contradiction as it's coming, then the rational understanding should be the rule for interpreting the Quran itself. The second principle was that all mankind, and this is very important, is equally endowed with the vital benefit of knowledge. All mankind, regardless of color, of culture, of language. And they call this a necessary intellect. The extent of knowledge depends on the capability to move by an act of reflection from the level of necessary knowledge to the level of acquired knowledge. So they have this differentiation between necessary knowledge, which all the people are equal. All the people have this necessary knowledge. God has given it to everyone. Okay. Acquired knowledge is how every individual develops this necessary knowledge by way of thinking. The third epistemological principle, a duty imposed by God, and therefore the ultimate objective of intellectual reflection was that to know God. The Mu'tazilites argued that God provided man with necessary intellect that enables him to reflect and acquire true knowledge of the divine, independent of revelation. That's very important. And this view assumed a harmony between rational acquired knowledge and divine revelation. Mu'tazilite theology was an attempt to construct a permanent synthesis between human intellect and revelation. In a situation of apparent contradiction, the data of revelation were to be interpreted by human reflection. And here comes a metaphor. So whatever apparent contradiction between what is perceived by rational reflection and what is mentioned in the Quran should be interpreted as metaphorical. Metaphor, allegory, and other figures of speech. The intellectual opponents of the Mu'tazilites were the traditionalists who upheld the literal interpretation of all Quranic verses to the extent that they affirmed the existential reality of all divine attributes, all eschatological images, and even the idea that God can be seen by human eyes. The Mu'tazilites objected to their idea that the literal interpretation of the holy text was a religious duty. They objected to that, regarding it as an obstacle to the fulfillment of mankind's destiny. They believed that God himself imposed on mankind the duty to acquire real knowledge by using these rational faculties. This background of the Mu'tazilites explains the Mu'tazilites' theory of the relation between man, language, and holy text. They concentrated on man as the addressee of the text and its teaching, and regarded Quranic texts as, and I use texts in plural, as created action, not the eternal verbal accounts of God. Well, this is a very delicate question. If the Quran is created, so it is not eternal by God himself, or is as eternal as God himself. And of course we can understand whoever believes the Quran as eternal would stick to the literal meaning. To every letter would count. Any metaphorical explanation will not be accepted. Those who accept the idea that the Quran is created, so they apply language, method, linguistic method to understanding the Quran. Anyway, this very problematic question about the eternity of the Quran and the createdness of the Quran was solved by the interference of the political authority. And here the beginning of mixing politics and religion in Islamic history. A caliph, an Abbasid caliph, was thought that he was a very rational. He wanted to enforce the ideas of the Mu'tazilites, the rational ideas, by the power of the state on other groups and prosecute it. And this was the age of Inquisition. And you can understand how the majority of the people react against this rationality imposed by the state. But later on, another caliph within the same system was against rationalism. So we imposed the idea of traditionalism on the public and persecuted the rational thinker. I think from that point in history, this was in the 3rd century. Politics had been part of the intellectual debate about religious issue, and so far, till now, it is the problem of the Muslim world. Governments, political regime, they have all their ideology, and they would impose their ideology on the people. This was my master dissertation about the metaphor in the Quran, and I came to the conclusion, and this is which led me to the second question of my life. The conclusion was that the Mu'tazilites have certain ideology, pretext ideology, and they wanted to get some proof from the text to their ideology. So they were very, very intelligent, they were very, very talented, and they used a specific Quranic verse, which say that the Quran includes ambiguous verses and clear verses. But the ambiguous verses should be understood in relation to the clear verses. The Quran did not indicate exactly what the ambiguous verses are and what the clear verses are. So even this statement of the Quran is ambiguous in itself. But the Mu'tazilites were very intelligent. Whatever they find in the Quran to contradict their own pretext ideology, they consider as ambiguous. So a metaphorical explanation was presented. Whatever is in agreement with their pretext ideology is clear. So it doesn't need to be metaphorically explained. The opponents of the Mu'tazilites used the same method. And here they took what the Mu'tazilites considered as clear Their opponent said this is ambiguous, so it needs interpretation. What was ambiguous for the Mu'tazilites was for their opponents clear. So it was like a semantic game based on the duality, ambiguity, and clarity in the Quran. So I came to the conclusion in this early thesis that the Quran became a field of war, a battlefield between all Muslims. So every group can easily find what they want. If they say, well, this is ambiguous, this is clear. And from this moment I thought, well, why don't I investigate the question outside theology? Why don't I go to mysticism? And I thought mysticism as spiritual maneuver, spiritual understanding of religion might be void of this political ideology that interfered with the Mu'tazilites and their opponents. So I studied a very famous mystic, Sufi. His name is Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. He lived in Andalusia in Spain. And Muhyiddin ibn Arabi tried to understand the Quran in a very, very open way, to the extent that he allowed all knowledge from Aristotle to his age to be contained in the Quran by way of how do you read the Quran. So in fact, he made the Quran a very open text that contained all kinds of knowledge: Christianity, Judaism, even paganism. I mean, worshipping idols. Ibn Arabi would say, well, anyone who is worshipping an idol, he doesn't really believe that the idol is God, but he believes that there is something divine in this idol. So divinity is there. Ibn Arabi introduced what you can say the religion of love. He has a very lovely poem in which he says, my heart is open. You can find in my heart a house of idols. You can find a church. You can find a Jewish temple. You can find a Buddhist temple. A Kaaba. This is the shrine of Mecca. Because my heart is open to anything. It's the religion of love. And my comment, this was my PhD thesis, trying to study the methodology, how Ibn Arabi tried to read in the Quran all these philosophies, ideologies. And my comment at the end of my thesis was, well, Ibn Arabi was a very clever thinker. He tried to solve the problem of the world, the conflict between different religions, between inter-religion sectors also. He was, in fact, very influenced by the situation in Andalusia at that time, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived together, where Arabic and other language was living. So it was a multi-religious society, a multi-language society, and Ibn Arabi was trying to introduce something for the society, introducing something for the whole world. He was aware of the blood shape involved in all this kind of conflict between religions and between religious sectors within the same religion, within Muslims, for example. So my comment was, well, Ibn Arabi was a very fine man. He tried to solve the problem of the world, but instead of addressing the problems, he just gave his back to the world and built a utopia, which would not solve anything. So again, the Quran was used in a way to solve certain problems, and pragmatic interpretation was presented. So I came to the question, and this could be an intellectual question, academic question, but it was also a question of a citizen living in a Muslim society like Egypt, and looking by one eye to what happened in the past, and with the other eye to what is happening in the present. Egypt at that time, the 60s and the 70s, was going during a change of the political regime, of the political system, from nationalism to socialism, and then back from socialism to open economic market. During this kind of economic and political ideological change, Islam was used to justify nationalism, to justify socialism, and to justify capitalism. So my question was addressing the present situation as addressing the history of our culture. What is the Quran? What is the text? Don't we need to define the Quran before just going ahead and reading what we need in the Quran? Is it possible to listen to the Quran in its own dimension? Does the Quran have any specific characteristic that would give us a clue to the way of a proper reading, a proper interpretation, instead of just indulging to the Quran by pre-ideology and trying to catch what we need in the Quran? So the question for me was not very much what we need, but very much what the text tells. Because I felt there was a threat to the Quran, a damage to religion, whether by traditionalist or by modernist in certain time. So gradually, I came to a certain methodological rules I tried to apply myself, and I tried to develop during this application, trying to address my students, to address the academic arena, to address the public about the way to understand the Quran. So enlightenment or reformation started very early in our Islamic history, but it was blocked by the political interference. Now, modern reformist movement started at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. It was also damaged some way by the political interference of the internal political systems, used sometimes. But there was also the external interference that did not allow a proper development of the reformation in Egypt. Well, Europe has, to a great extent, some responsibility of that. I will explain this if it comes into any question. Of course, the United States politics in the area is not giving any help to this reforming movement. In fact, the United States politics is in a way supporting the very traditionalist, the very extremist movement, because this is the way to stand against foreign policy interfering in the area. So how to face the internal dictatorship in every Muslim country? And in the meantime, how to be honest in order to refuse the international politics which support this dictatorship system, and in the meantime, while pretending that they are fighting fundamentalism, they are in a way giving fundamentalism legitimacy in their society. This is the big question of the reformation of Islam, reformation of Islamic thought. That's why in the mass media here or in Europe, what you look is only the fundamentalist, terrorist Islam. For the reformist or the modernist, it's only a lecture in a place like this. Okay, in a very closed circle, but not for the public, not for the mass media. The same situation within every Muslim society. I mean, I was never allowed to the Egyptian TV or the Egyptian radio. I might publish some article in opposition newspaper, which are very weak newspaper, I mean 1,000 readers or something like that. But not in the national newspaper or any newspaper that could be distributed in oil countries. Okay, so there is internal obstacle to the real reformation, which is very, very possible because it started a long time ago. Well, let me try to be very biased to say Enlightenment started in the history of Islam before the Enlightenment in Europe. Let me say something else. Averroes, an Arab Muslim philosopher, have contributed so much to the Renaissance. Okay, whether by his translation to Aristotle's works or by his own books, he introduced to the church the idea of reason, and the church, the Western church, split as the pro-Averroes and anti-Averroes movement. I mean, enlightenment is very possible. Reformation is very possible. Okay, there is in the heritage roots to this, and in the modern situation there is need for this. But the question is that the political situation, the internal and the international political situation, is not really. In fact, it creates a great obstacle against any kind of movement. I won't want to get into details in my methodology of understanding or explaining the Quran, because I would like to give more time to discussion. Because I believe sometimes a question would enable the speaker to give more than when he is trying to give without being, challenged by a question. Well, I think we can start.
Let's go ahead and open the floor to questions. Would you like to field the questions yourself? And yes, please.
Hi, I'd like to know about the Mutazila and how much of the Greek influence is there. When I read it,
How much?
of the Greek influence. If I remember correctly, there's a lot of interaction between different philosophers and sessions.
Yes. Well, let me, but the Mu'tazila at the very beginning was influenced by Christian theology, and it is John of Damascus who raised out of question against Islam, against predestination in Islam, and reacting to this Christian theological challenge, the Mu'tazilites started to think about this problem. And then Greek philosophical influence came through a medium translation, not direct translation from Greek to Arabic. And I think the people in Syria at that time, in Sham, Syria, they had already translated some works of Aristotle and Plato. Okay. So Greek thought was known as the 2nd century of Islamic era during indirect translation. But translating directly, I think it came on the 10th century and 11th century. So there was a lot of Greek philosophical influence in the Mu'tazilite idea. And this kind of interaction continued through philosophy, through Farabi, Avicenna, and then Averroes. Translation, commentary on great works of the Greek philosophers was there in Arabic, and I think it was known, the works of Aristotle were known through the Arabic translation before they discovered the manuscript of the Greek manuscript of Aristotle. That's why it's sometimes simplification when we speak about Islamic civilization and Western civilization as two absolute, separated civilization. This is not the case.
You made a comment that both the reformist and traditionalist movements are damaging the Quran, but yet you seem to be advocating the rationalist reformist movement. Is that contradictory, or?
Yeah, I think they reach different conclusions, but in my opinion, they use similar methods. The method is to look to the Quran, not what the Quran can say, can tell, but what do you want the Quran to tell you. And I can give examples from Muhammad Abdu, from the very beginning, maybe Sayyid Ahmed Khan, even a great scholar like Fatul Rahman. Okay. The kind of trying to resist your ideological bias, and this is very difficult, by the way, but to try as best as you can, even your bias as a Muslim. Okay, trying to approach the text in its own merits. It's very hard. Sometimes it's impossible. But I think scholarship should try the best. I started my life, in fact, in the same way, trying to find what's the best, okay, to the community from the Quran. But sometimes you choose what is the best, okay, from your own point of view. But other groups, they have the same right to look for the best from their own point of view. So traditionalism and modernism, in fact, was using the same method, okay, because the strategy was not as much to study the text, but to find in the text solutions to problems formulated by the scholar who tried to. Muhammad Saud, for example, if you of course, there's a good friend of mine, but we have different opinions about some. I mean, the conclusion is lovely, okay? But how much could be legitimized from the text? How much could I quote anti-text to what conclusions? I mean, if I put myself in the foot of a fundamentalist, I would easily refute the conclusions reached by Fatul Rahman, Muhammad Abdu, so I started like this, but I became aware of this danger. Okay, so that's why my way is not accepted by both groups, because I would say, well, the Quran is I believe in the Quran, the word of God, but the word of God could be historical. I mean, there are certain teaching in the Quran, in my opinion, that address the 7th century, full stop. Okay? And there are other verses that was still able to address. Okay? So this distinction between the meaning and the significance, okay, and how to read significance, modern significance, to the 7th century meaning is very difficult. That's why I became very critical, and sometimes from period and period of my life, I became very critical to what I have written before. And I think of this as a sign of, it's not a bad sign, okay? Because I know how much I am caught by the Quran, okay? How can I distance myself in order to understand exactly what the Quran says? Sometimes I use a very simple method to read a translation of the Quran. So this is another language. Because I'm very well invested in the Arabic language of the Quran. I memorized the Quran when I was 8 years old. It's very difficult to make a distance, and it's very important to make a distance if you really want to make a real scholarship. So this kind of struggle between, or self-awareness of your bondage with the object you are studying and trying to find a space, it's very, very difficult. And this is the difficulty, I mean, this is my difficulty as a scholar, not to mention my difficulty as a citizen. That's another problem. So that's true. I claim that both are using the text.
In terms of the conflict between the fundamentalists and the modernists in Islam, do you foresee an upcoming conflict in the PLO when Yasser Arafat retires, because he is becoming very old and is getting rather sick?
well, I'm not a politician, but I have funny ideas about politics. I don't know how much conflict is going to be here. And as long as Yasser Arafat is not going to leave the office, but by the hand, then the conflict increases. If he decides, let's say, 10 years ago, to have another people, building out, the conflict will not be there. But it's not only Yasser Arafat. I mean, tell me about any Arab leader who left the office while he is alive. So it's not a Palestinian problem. It's an Arab problem. We don't have an ex-president or an ex-king. We would love to have an ex-president. I mean, we respect him, but all were assassinated. Okay, so they were forced to leave. I think Yasser Arafat is very much like everyone. He feels that he is the prophet of the Palestinian nation. And I think prophetship is over. Muhammad was the last one. So anyone, even a scholar who thinks he is a prophet of his field, it's very, very, very dangerous. I think there would be a lot of conflict, you cannot tell. As much as the Egyptian people are afraid, they are going to give Hosni Mubarak a fourth term against the constitution. And when he came to power, he said, no, it's only 2 terms, 1 term. Now he accepted the third, he will accept the fourth, maybe the fifth. God gives him life. And when you ask, I'm going to ask my friends, who are you? They said, well, do you have any substitute? Because I think Egypt is full of people who are capable of doing the same bad thing. Okay. I mean, if you elect me as a president, maybe I would be better, maybe I would be worse, but I can do whatever. It's a society of patriarchy based on tribal society, in a way, different way. Yes.
To get back to, excuse me, what you were talking before, could you please elaborate a little bit on the way, or some of the ways that the text has spoken to you, and then you have discovered some of those metaphors to sort of make a perhaps a balance between. And I have one more question, but then please.
All right. Well, this is a big question. Well, I try to put it very as simple as possible. Well, I think it's very essential to look to the Quran from 2 dimensions together in a dialectical way. The first dimension is what I think the diachronic dimension. Okay, the Quran is one text. There's a multiplicity of texts because it was revealed through 22 years. Okay, every portion of revelation was sometimes 3 verses, 5 verses, the maximum 15 verses, very short chapter. Okay, so in fact we have texts. Every text, if we go back to contextualize this process, every text was addressing certain issue. Whether this issue is theological, practical, whatever it is. Okay. So this is very important to again try to look to the Quran in that chronological dimension. And what the fuqaha, the jurists in the history of Islam, were the only scholars who did this. Because the fuqaha wanted to know what kind of law can be deduced from the Quran. So they have to find which law was revealed first and which was revealed after. And maybe they can solve some problems of contradiction by thinking that the later abrogated the earlier, so we have to stick to the later and just forget about the earlier. So only the jurist use this method. I think any scholarship now should recontextualize the whole text by looking to this dimension, the chronological dimension. And by this we can know the meaning, at least. Okay. What kind of meaning this specific text of the Quran was revealing to the people in the 7th century. And then we have the other dimension, which is the dimension of the text as it is now. The arrangement of the Quran is not the same arrangement of its revelation. It has been rearranged in different way. And this kind of rearrangement is very important because this is the Quran which influenced the Muslim people from the 1st century till now. Okay, this kind of arrangement has some meaning, some significance. Okay, so in one way we look at the Quran as multiplicity of texts, and we look at it as one unified texts. And here, by recontextualization, we have at the beginning the total context, the 7th century context, the 7th century of the pre-Arabic Peninsula, in the international political and economic, situation. What kind of tribal conflict, what kind of tribal system was there? What is the difference between the north and the south? What is the difference between the desert and the villages, the settled, villages and cities like Mecca, like Medina? What kind of religions also was there? Because we know Christianity was there, Judaism was there, other non-revealed religion was there, because there was an intertextuality between the Quran and this religion. There is some sort of dialogue, sometimes violent dialogue within the text. We have to understand this. And this would enable us, in the long run, maybe to look to what is historical in the text, what is limited to in time and space, and what is universal. Of course, the question will not be answered and closed, because in every age the question also will be raised. Maybe what is universal now will not be universal next generation. Some people think this would damage the Muslim belief in the divinity of the text. My point of view of departure is as simple as that. Even God, speaking to man, his speech has to be regulated to human limitation, human boundaries. And this is a very understandable. I mean, if I'm talking to my child, okay, I'm using his language, not my language. So God's speech, okay, is limited in form, limited in cultural background. It could not be understood without this. But of course, because it is divine, it contains an element of universality, encoding element that could be decoded in every age. But I have to be very careful, okay, to protect myself from my desire, okay, as a scholar, from bias as a scholar, to pretend that everything is decoded, and therefore, and this is exactly what some people are doing, claiming that every scientific theory, every scientific finding, okay, discovered this century, there is a root of the discovery in the Quran. This is a tafsir ilmi, or the scientific interpretation of the Quran. It's very hard. I mean, I have been working for this for the last 20 years, and I give, for example, well, let me give you an example like maybe Shahrur have told you about this, the inheritance law. Okay. The inheritance law, in general, is as much as a law dedicated to the blood relationship. And this was exactly the tribal society. Okay. So according to the closeness in blood relation, the more inheritance was given. So here, if I put it into the context where women, for example, did not receive any portion of inheritance, okay, nothing at all. Even the first Muslim generation opposed the injunction that the Quran said, you give a girl, a female, half shape of a male. The Muslim did not easily accept this, not to say apply it, okay, because it was strange. And if you look to what kind of argumentation they used, you can understand it. So, okay, I know from the objectives of the Quran, okay, and this is another process of looking to the universal, that equality is there in creating man, male and female from one soul. Equality is there between Muslims and non-Muslims. Equality is there between Arabs and non-Arabs. Okay, this is basic teaching. But in historical context, sometimes there is violation to this basic. If the Quran gave or treated a woman like half a man, it was understandable. I mean, if the Quran, I think if the Quran just started by teaching equality, no one would accept it. Okay? It's like prohibiting alcohol consumption in gradual steps. If the Quran just came to in a society where everyone is enjoying, who can say no, you cannot consume alcohol, no one would listen. So there is here a gradual process of introducing things to the society. So, and now I know if I say, okay, well, it was okay in the 7th century, but now it is not okay. Now it is not okay because sometimes a woman has a job, she is responsible for the family, and a man does not have a job. Okay. We are talking about patriarchal society, but now this is, in a way, it is changing. And here, it is very possible if we say, well, let's make it equal. If we do this in the law, I think we are not against the Quran. We are following the direction of the essential message of the Quran. This could be applied to the position of non-Muslim in a Muslim society too. Okay? Because the injunction of jizya or extra taxes for non-Muslim was not invention of Islam. I mean, the Roman imposed this kind of taxes on non-Roman citizens. So, and other examples, but it should be based on the contextualization, not in any mathematical method, not in any way of, it should be from within the linguistic boundaries of the text. It should be from within, looking carefully to the history of the text and how it is developed during these 22 years.
Do you have a second question?
Yeah. Shall I ask it or shall I wait? Well, actually, the second might lead to the third, so I don't want to monopolize. And that actually goes back to the earlier comments about the Mu'tazilites. I've always been very interested in Mu'tazilites and the way they developed, and I'm interested in the socio-historical context of the time that they developed, and in the interaction and the struggle between the Abbasid and the Umayyad. I'm interested in finding out more about the nationality, if you may call it that, or the ethnic identity of those who advocated the idea, and their relationship to the Abbasids.
Yes.
In social and political and religious terms.
Well, if we just see the names of the founder of this theology, they are not Arabs. They are Mawali. Non-Arabs who are under the protection of Arab tribes. Well, as like another group, the Khawarij, was basically Bedouin from scattered tribes and weak tribes, other than the strong Quraysh tribe of the Prophet. Okay. So those who started this movement, very clear from these names, it's Mawali. Okay. They are non-Arab.
They were not Persians.
Well, some of them were Persians, but the Abbasid movement before it reached power. Okay, in the recruitment to people in order to fight against government. You know, when people gather together in one front, okay, to fight against a certain regime, this front was very open to some Shi'i people, supporters of Ali and his family, and some from Persian background, and most of the Shiites came from the Persian background. This is very interesting. So it was non-Arabs in general, okay, whether they are from Persian background or from other non-Arab background, including the Shiites. So especially the Zaydis. Now the Zaydis are in Yemen. Okay, so they gathered together under the ideology of Russians, fighting against the American revolution. And when the revolution succeeded, and it happens in every revolution, only the powerful group, okay, would try to eliminate other group. And that's exactly what happened after the Abbasid was established as a state. That's why the opposition to the Abbasid, the Shi'i opposition, started very early through the Abbasid period. That's why they are very, very powerful in emphasizing the fact that knowledge and reason, necessary knowledge, is open to every human being, regardless of color or race or language or culture. The very beautiful allegory that conveys this is the personality of Hayy ibn Aqdal in the philosophical metaphor allegory, as Hayy ibn Aqdal, as someone who is living in an island, empty, and we don't know from where he comes, okay? And this is very, very important and philosophical allegory, because this lonely man, like Robinson Crusoe, okay, in this island, and we don't know how he was born. There's no specific indication in this allegory. He could step by step, okay, by penetrating into nature. First of all, to his own body, okay, and then to the animals around him, and then to natural phenomena, and he reached the knowledge of God completely. And he even got in a devotion to serve his God without knowing language. Okay, I mean, and then another man from another island escaped his community to this island because he was persecuted, and he met this man, and he taught him language, and he was surprised that the man's knowledge is the same knowledge revealed in a holy religion. This is the example of the human being, as those Mu'tazilites dreamed about. A human being which does not have its capability from being an Arab or a Persian or a Greek. It's just a human being. And that is exactly, I mean, the example of human reason, of human, the capability of human reason to penetrate the metaphysical world, not only the physical world. And this is, if we call it, this is enlightenment, this is reason in enlightenment. And it started very, very early in the Islamic history, but again, the political interference damaged everything.
Thank you. My question is in a different note. I understand that the former colleague of yours who wrote the condemnation of your work that prompted Abuzied to initiate proceedings against you is now the colleague at Cairo University.
Oh!
Court,
You are following the very recent news.
Yes. I understand that Abuzied is now going after Shaheen for a very similar critique.
Right.
Would you care to comment on that at all?
Well, my comment on this, because when, some newspaper in Egypt contacted me, and they expected me to be very happy. But in fact, I wasn't. It's, when you start a fire in your neighbor house, it's very likely that it will catch your house. Okay. I wasn't happy, and this was surprising to the reporter who contacted me. Like I said, look, this is a very dangerous thing, okay, and it's a crime to be happy about it, because the man who's suffering now is the man who caused all the trouble to me. Okay. That was my comment, and I think this will be all of my comment. Personal suffering should not, okay, affect objective judgment to a phenomena which is very dangerous, not only to the Egyptian society but to the whole Islamic world, is to give someone the right to judge the writing of someone in a very severe way. Well, it's okay if he doesn't like the book. Why don't he write another book? I mean, a book for a book, an eye for an eye. Okay? And if everyone who writes a bad book would be killed, I think we'll kill 3.
Maybe even some professors would be here.
Yeah, okay. 70% of the people who write books. But this is I mean, this is the lesson people don't learn by invoking ignorance. Okay, that's exactly what my word. That Abdul Sabur Shaheen, when he attacked me, and he is a professor at the university, and he's a professor of linguistics. Okay, but in his academic report, he conveyed a complete stupidness about linguistics, because he said, well, Abuzaid is using so many funny vocabulary, like, okay, semantics, semiotics. I mean, my God, if you are a professor of linguistics and you consider the word semantics or semiotics as funny words, so what kind of words do you expect to have in a book? But I think he was addressing the Amma, he was addressing the people in the mosque who don't understand what semantics is, and he's used, you know, the English semantica, semiotica. So when you address the people in the mosque and say someone is talking about the Quran and saying semantica and politica, of course the people will be furious and they don't understand. So he invoked ignorance, and he is suffering from what he invoked. I mean, he created the devil, and now the devil is after him. Okay, I'm not happy about that, but I'm going to support him. I mean, my wife will divorce me if I support him. Well, by the way, this is a joke. She was very angry because the law changed after our case. So in fact, this man will not be able to do to him. So my wife was very angry because the law changed it. Well, this is kind of joke, of course. She's not serious about that. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about how can you explain that traditionalist dogma or discourse seems to be much more popular and effective than reformist and modernist kind, especially today.
Yeah.
And that would lead to a second part of it. Why is it so difficult for the Amma in our country to engage in that reformist movement, such as a Reformation movement in Europe?
Yeah.
Why is it so threatening?
Well, if I give Egypt as an example, I can speak about Egypt. If you look to the situation in the beginning of the 1920s till 1950s, till the revolution. Okay. This was a multi-political party system. Okay, to a great extent, free election, even with the existence of the royal family and the British occupation manipulating the political scene. Okay. But the parties, to a great extent, were able to address the people. And this kind of openness was very efficient with the educational system. Okay. Even the educational system before the revolution was much better than the educational system after the 50s. And so if you have an open public sphere, okay, where everyone can talk and can speak and have the right to vote, and he knows that his opinion will be respected. So you have a public open sphere. In this public open sphere, people are able to get more understanding what is this. That's why Hussein and others were addressing the public, and that's why doing the newspaper were more successful than we are. After the revolution, of course, the revolution, the 1952 revolution, has achieved so many good things in terms of the social welfare of the people, but it absolutely diminished, abolished democracy. Okay, so closed the public sphere of debate. And with this, the educational system started to be badly influenced gradually. Okay. If you look to the university, for example, interference in the university. First of all, in 1954, it was this movement of cleans university, and it was really a political movement in which more than 100 professors were dismissed, including in those professors liberal, Marxist, Islamist. Okay, so in fact, they cleansed the university from people who are able to think and to provoke thinking. And the interference in the university started to be more intense after till we reached the 70s. If you look to the Cairo University now, it's not so much different than other university. Okay, professor has a book, a textbook, and textbook is limited in the pages according to the hours of the course. And this is by the regulation of the university. I mean, if I'm teaching 2 hours, the book should not exceed 150 pages. If the course is 3 hours, it could be 20 pages. So there is no, making paper, going to the library. There is no, it's just the book written by the professor. And here the professor don't write books. Okay, they just quote other books by paste and copy. Okay, and they sell books, and this is very, very good business. So if a university is regulating how much pages a student should read in a course, this is not an education, this is dictation. And if you consider a book and a professor, and the professor is reading the book, and the students are writing what's in the book, so the student are dictating the book and buying the book, and there should be some evidence to the professor that every student has bought the book. So it is a circus. It is not even void of the amusement of circus. So what kind of education is there? So it's happened long time now. So in the political sphere, in the intellectual sphere, there is no debate, there is no open debate. That's why people became, unable to question. They are only able to listen to answers. And fundamentalist movement are very, very clever in presenting easy answers to difficult questions. If someone else is asking the people to think, is giving a probable answers, people will not be very happy. Because if you say, well, it's possible to be this way, but it's almost possible to be this way, people, they want a clear answer. This is very damaging. So the traditionalist is successful because of the absence of public sphere debate, of the ill-educational system, and that's why it's very hard. Now the mass media is under control of the government. I mean, now people are watching TV more than reading books. And in Egypt, for example, illiteracy is more than 60%. So if only 40% can read, and you can imagine only 30% will read the whole newspaper, and the other 30 will go to sports, okay, and other things. And from these 30% who would read the whole paper, again, 15% will read books. You can imagine the situation. So if the only way to address people is to write books or articles, you are nowhere. Okay. While traditionalists are using TV by the help of the government, the radio, and not to forget the mosque. The mosque is a more powerful mass media than the TV. So I think this is reasons that the traditionalist discourse is dominating, and it is, in a way, very compatible with the official political discourse about religion. I mean, there is no real conflict between the political discourse about religion of the state and the very fundamentalist discourse. The difference is on the mean to spread the discourse. Okay? So governments are not against the ideology of fundamentalism. They are against the behavior using violence. But in fact, basically, on the deep level of the discourse, there's no difference.
So would you agree with some of the justification of the modernists in thinking about Algeria, Northern Algeria, and justifying to bypass in the beginning the opinion of the public interest, social interest?
I was against this in the first place. 1992 was a crime by the military elite, who also think that they are the prophets of the nation. And France. I mean, if the people, on a free choice, have chosen, they have the right to taste their choice. And I think when the people are able to choose, they will be able to change. But everyone is afraid. The problem is everyone is afraid, and everyone is making himself the godfather of the nation, who knows best what really people need. No, I'm an intellectual. It means I am a civil servant. Okay, like anyone else is doing the other job. It shouldn't give me any authority to tell the people what they should do and what they should not do. I would give my discourse. The people would accept it, that's fine. They refuse it, that should be fine with me. I mean, depriving the people from their choice was very bad. I think Iran, because people were not deprived of argument, Iran is now trying to get through. And this is a sign. If the people choose, and if they make wrong choice, they can also make reformation. That's why reformation is a public interest. It's not some intellectual interest. The people who voted for Khatami was not intellectuals. And this is a good sign. I hope that the international stupid politics will not damage what's going on in Iran, because it's very important to the Muslim world. For a religious state like Iran to go through this process of democratization and you know, accommodation of liberty, of plurality, okay, that's a very good sign. And that's a very good proof that Islam is not against this, because people there, I mean, it's the ideology of the state that is Islam. It's the Shiite state.
I wonder if I may ask a question. Would you talk a little bit about the intellectual community that you're a part of? I mean, it's clear that people who approach Islam in ways that are parallel to the way that you approach Islam constitute a relatively interesting group of speakers. And one can think of examples, and writers, one can think of examples from Egypt, and Syria, and Iran, and Turkey, and Indonesia, and so on. Would you speak a little bit about this community, I mean, beyond the state? Is there an international discourse that is going on to what extent are immigrant communities in Europe and the United States participating in this? And when you look to the future, how do you see this dialogue, this discourse developing?
Yeah, this is a very important question, and we thought about it only a few months ago. Is it possible to bring those people who are individuals in the country? We don't, in any specific country, we don't form a group that have real impact unless this group is affiliated with the government, or sometimes in a way negatively affect the discourse in a negative way. Is to bring those people together, and I tried last June to I organized a conference about Quranic study, and I brought together those people from Muslim world, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, from India, from Egypt and Syria. Muhammad was there, and from North Africa, and from South Africa, and even with European scholars. From Europe and United States and Canada. And I think this is, in my opinion, and I think everyone expressed it, it's the first time not to have Muslims and non-Muslim scholars together, but to have Muslim scholars from different countries together. And we intend to continue this kind of communication to create some sort of platform. This question. But this is very, very new. And the only place to meet is outside the Muslim world, which again would make it very, not part of the soil. Okay? For Muslims in Europe or Muslims in the Western world, there are groups again. Okay? That range from very, very fundamentalist groups to a more open groups, so they have their own activity, but separate activities. There's no collective ground that can make. But anyway, every dialogue between Muslim scholars, and non-Muslim scholars start this way. To tell you the truth, I am not optimistic, but I cannot afford to be pessimistic. So I am optimistic in an indirect way. Because being optimistic is a way to continue. In every country, in Egypt, for example, the system, which I call the Third Republic, okay, just to avoid using naming a country by name, Nasser and Saddam. The Third Republic have succeeded in something which the First Republic and the Second Republic failed. Because of the terrorist activity, which was in Cairo and in Upper Egypt, and this created an atmosphere of support to the system by intellectuals who were supposed to be in opposition. So the support for the system now is widening. I mean, individual intellectuals now are still outside this kind of support. And I feel this is as a negative side, because the system, whatever it looks like, is the system. Okay. So the critical discourse, critical discourse, is weak inside. People are very courageous to talk in closed door. But in the open, especially when the topic is religion, everyone is reluctant to say anything different than the traditional way of seeing this is. So it seems that the only option is for people to go out and to be able to speak. How far this will lead, I don't know. Really. In Syria, for example, it's Hafiz al-Assad, with his great, strong hand, okay, who is able to accommodate Shahrur and Sadr al-Azm. But I think the moment also Assad will die, okay, or be killed. You cannot tell what happened in some years ago, what would affect, because the traditionalist, fundamentalist trend is very strong in Syria. But they are under this, strong grip of Haftar. He's keeping it. It's the same in Tunisia. I mean, even countries which look very bright, that's the surface, because the military regime is very strong against the people. But traditionalism is there, and the wrong they are underground. The more fundamentalist they develop. So this is the situation. And as I said, the international politics is not helping in changing this scene. As long as the interest of the international power is protected, everything is beautiful.
If I can follow up and ask a more personal question.
Yeah.
And I know you're tired of this subject. I know you're tired of it. But look, thinking about the question constructively, what are the conditions under which you could return to Egypt in your full capacity? I know we were talking earlier, you could return to Egypt.
Yeah.
But under what circumstances, what would have to take place in order for you to be able to return to Cairo and resume your responsibilities at the university, even teaching in the context of Islamic study of Islam and so on? Because of course the doctrine that was used to declare you an apostate and to force your wife to divorce you is now a doctrine which is totally illegal. So what steps would need to take place for this condition to change?
Well, there is no legal steps to be taken. My lawyers, and by the way, the coordinator of the defense community is a woman, and she will be in this conference, and she is the one who is not ready to give up. I mean, I gave up. I told her, look, Muna, it's over. I mean, just forget about it. Relax. But she didn't relax. And how strong this person, this woman is. She, I mean, this was the last thing that she accomplished, which is, for me is a big victory. She could challenge the verdict on the lower court on the ground that it was based on anti-constitutional law. And she made this kind of, well, as far as I understand it, she said there is no crime in the Egyptian law called apostasy. So there's no crime, there's no law, there is no crime, there should be any punishment. Because this is the simple logic of, so the law according to which the verdict was based is against the Constitution. And to great surprise, the lower court accepted the challenge. But the whole case has to be now taken to the Constitutional Court to decide if the law which is used is inconstitutional or not. But how long this will take in the Constitutional Court? Maybe 10 years. Okay. Maybe 10 days. You cannot tell. But if the Constitutional Court decided that this challenge is valid, so the verdict is against the Constitution, then the whole case had to start from the beginning again. I mean, it would not dismiss the case. And then the change of the law that came after the verdict could not be applied to this case, because it was before the law. So the whole case had to start from the very beginning, from the first instance court, and then the appeal court, and then the cassation court. I mean, we'll go, from scratch, as we say in the computer language. So it doesn't seem likely that I would be able to return back and function in my complete capacity. There is one thing that would allow me but I think this is impossible. A public apology. Not to change the verdict, but a public apology from the highest authority in my country. I know the people are not against me. I know them. I know the people, the women, young men, the majority of the Egyptian people. But the silent majority, who can speak to you, who can phone you, who can send you a letter, but they will never know. They don't have the courage to. They are against this. And I was ready to stick in Egypt, and I asked for half an hour on TV. Because I wanted to address, I'm an Egyptian fellow. Before a professor, before anything, I'm an Egyptian Muslim fellow. And I don't want the people of the country to think that I'm against Islam. So I wanted half an hour. And I was sure that my skill as a teacher, okay, would enable me to communicate with people. But just give me half an hour. And my point to the Minister of Information, that you gave a terrorist person who repented from being a terrorist, was given 2 hours on the Egyptian satellite. And it was repeated several times. I said, well, I think I deserve something like this. Okay, so give me half an hour, but no answer was given. It's very hard. Yesterday in Chicago, a lot of Islamist people were there. Okay. And for my surprise, most of them came and said, well, we are very sorry. We thought you are not Muslim. So that's the point. I think everyone has to listen to you. Okay. What they know now is the verdict and all this propaganda made. So a public apology, which I think is not likely to become, because this at least will give me the courage to go into the classroom, to meet my students, okay, to deal with my neighbors in my house. Because I'm a very social person. I love strolling in the street, talking with people, okay, having a coffee, in a coffee shop, talking to stranger people. I'm not a man who is, between the office and the study room in his house. Sometimes I love communicating with people. I will not have this chance. So Egypt, for me, is not there. If I return back and being able to do this, I'm not in Egypt. So it doesn't matter if I am in Egypt or in Holland or in the United States, as long as my life will be the classroom and in my study room, sometimes going to the movie or to a theater or having an academic discussion with some friends, it could be done anywhere. Okay. Well, I know it's not an easy thing to ask, and it will not happen. But let me say that I'm very angry. It has been 3 years now, 4 years now, and my anger is not, there's no any reason my anger. Any. Very, very angry. And I'm angry for my country. Okay? Like someone who's angry for his mother. You love your country, but you're angry to the extent that I told my wife is with me, she didn't divorce me. She insisted that she would never leave me, and then she was labeled by Abdul as Zania. And this hurt more than the verdict, she said. And that's why my wife is very angry. And she said she would love to listen to his wife commenting on this case. Anyway, I told her, well, look, Egypt did not like me. Okay. Don't take my body back to my bed when I'm dead, because I don't want to think about Egypt as a grave. Okay. She did not accept what is well. This is my will. I will write it down and give it to a lawyer, and you have to apply to it. Because really, I hate to think about myself as returning back to my country in a box. Egypt is more important to me than to be agreed. So this is my condition. I made it very, very explicit to the people of the authority. But you know how politics is. I mean, as I told you, everyone is happy that I'm not there. And I think I have to learn to be happy also, as long as I'm able to communicate. And I still publish in Arabic. Both my books are in Egypt, more demanded than ever. My name is there. Some of these people have been able to steal some of my phrases and use them. That's fine. So I'm happy. I mean, it's in a way my ideas are there. Okay. So I have to accept this reality. But I will not ever try to get rid of my hunger because it protects me. It protects me to continue. So if a courageous president would say, well, this man was a good man, and they say this man was a good man, we need him in the university, so we should apologize to him. We cannot change the court's verdict because this is against the law, but please come back to your homeland. I will take the first flight to Cairo.
Sure. Yeah. Before we all thank you for this presentation, here, can I have that box? I would like to make a small presentation to you on behalf of Boston University. It's very unusual to hear a speaker who gives us a glimpse not only of a wonderful mind at work, and not only of a wonderful ability to teach, but lets us see right inside of their soul to get a glimpse of their moral fiber. And this is something very special. And so I think this morning we've not only learned and benefited from the profound work we've been doing for so many years, but you've also reminded us of something much more important, and that is the importance of fundamental integrity and values. And for that, especially, I want to thank you. This is a small gift from Boston University. This is a pen set. It's the best thing we can give you. And we hope that we have to send you many refills for the pens. Thank you very much. Perhaps you'll join us, and for those of you who can stay for a few moments to talk to the speaker, you're more than welcome.